We're picking up Act 1, Scene 3, bottom of page 1251 in the 11th edition. That scene begins with, remember, Laertes speaking with his sister Ophelia, and they're talking about Hamlet's affection for her. And Laertes essentially advises her, don't believe a word that he says. He doesn't really love you. He implies. All he wants to do is have sex with you. And she's kind of like, golly gee, really, big brother? Is that all he wants? And he says yes, okay? So she then flips that back on him because he's getting ready to go back to Paris and says, don't teach me the thorny path, of abstinence and virtue, etc., and not follow it yourself. And he says, oh, no. I never would, do that. Okay? So Polonius then comes in because they're at Polonius's house. These are the two children of Polonius. And Polonius says, you're still here? For shame, for shame. Okay? And he says, these few, 55, 56, 57, 58, these few precepts in thy memory, look thou character. Look thou character doesn't mean pay attention to your character. It means in your memory, in your mind, write these down. Character there means to write or to inscribe. Okay? Which is kind of interesting because he's now telling Laertes, memorize what I'm about to tell you. In a few moments, we're going to see Hamlet speak with his dead father's ghost, and his father's ghost is going to tell him to remember some things, and Hamlet's going to finish that speech, and he tells us, he's going to remember only one thing, okay, which we'll talk about when we get to. So, here's the advice. Give thy thoughts no tongue, bottom of 1251, 59 I think this is now. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. What does that mean in modern language? Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Think before you speak is the first part. So don't just say what you're thinking, all right? Nor any unproportioned thought his act. That is, a thought that hasn't been thought out. Don't act on it. Okay? I asked you the other day, in preparation for today, to read through this passage and determine whether or not you think this is good or bad advice. He goes on. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Familiar. Be known. Be present. But don't be too known. Don't be overly present. Have you ever been to a gathering, a get-together, a party or something, or maybe you've thrown one, and there's somebody who just won't leave? It's supposed to go from, 5 until midnight or something, and one or two people, you're dog-tired, and they won't go. I have had that experience a few times. That's what he's getting at, okay? Or by no means vulgar, don't be involved in everything, right? The last 20 years, 30 years, politically speaking, I'm not going to name any names. There have been politicians that the media and the populace have said, just shut up. Go away. More than one, by the way, to make sure everybody understands this. Just leave. You're not in office anymore. Slink off to your hole. Why? Because they won't go away. Those friends thou hast and their adoption tried, that is, and you've proven their friendship, grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel. That is, bind them to yourself. Not obviously, literally, metaphorically. That is, really cement that friendship. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatched, unfledged comrade. What is one of the reasons, or what is one of the things this thing is used for an awful lot, other than making a phone call or taking photos? Social media. Notice the first part of that word. How social is it really? How social is Instagram? Facebook? TikTok? It's not. If anything, by the very definition of the word social, it's anti-social. Why? Because what is between you and that other person? A medium of some sort. Facebook friends aren't, my opinion, and you have to agree with it, Facebook friends are not real friends unless they are friends that you've known for a while. I know people who have literally thousands of Facebook friends. People in South America when they've never been to South America, etc. I think I have 13. Most of them are family. And that's not even all my family, by the way. Okay? So, what he's talking about there is someone you've just met is not suddenly what? A friend. A best friend. I would say take out the best friend, just a friend. They're an acquaintance. They're someone you know, so to speak. Okay? Beware of entrance to a quarrel. Good advice, right? Don't get in fights. But, being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. If you do get in a fight, maybe not a physical fight, a verbal fight, do what? That is, if you can't avoid it, then do what? One word. Win. Win. Win in such a manner that the other person what? Never wants to get involved in a fight with you again. In other words, if it's a verbal altercation, verbally destroy that person. That doesn't mean ad hominem attack. You're ugly and you're stupid. Okay? What's it mean? Rip apart that person's argument. So, rhetorically and logically destroy the person that they slink off to their hole, never wanting to involve themselves with you again. And if it's physical, old George Bush's shock and awe. Just beat the living daylights out of them so that they know never do that again. Okay? Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. That is, if someone wants to talk to you, listen to what they say, but don't give every man your voice. That is, don't. What is meant by your voice? Which often reflect what? Your opinions. In other words, keep your opinions to yourself. What is his job? Advisor to the king. He's paid to do what? Give his opinions. Okay? Take each man's censure. What is censure? It's correction. It's judgment. So when someone says, you didn't do that quite right, rather than immediately get in a battle stance, do what? You know, you're right. Listen to it. Accept it. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Because what do we often tend to do when we are criticized? Let me rephrase that. What do I often tend to do when I am criticized? I want to give back. Not, altruistically, I want to retaliate. So take that criticism, but don't respond. Oh yeah, well you don't do that. So far, we're halfway through his speech. Good advice or bad advice? See, I think this is pretty damn good advice. If more people would follow this advice, the world would be a much better place. But he's not done yet. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not exposed and fancy. In other words, what you can afford, not what you can charge, not what you can put on the credit card. You should wear what is within your means. Okay, that's why what's meant by habit. Rich, that is well made, but not gaudy. Don't go walking around like Elton John at one of his concerts. Okay? For the apparel oft proclaims the man. I'll tell you right now, I have rebelled against that idea from the time I was your age. What does that mean, the apparel oft proclaims the man? How you, go ahead.
The clothes or like what you wear like represents what?
It tells people what you are. You will not see somebody in the business school dressed like this, except for maybe on Friday. Why? Because in the business world, what is the appropriate attire? Coat and tie, nice slacks, except for on Fridays, which are often dressed down, which is casual, khakis, jeans, but still a collared shirt. Okay? Not one that's not been ironed, and definitely probably not Levi's during the other days of the week. Business school, I'm pretty sure, not positive, pretty sure it literally has a dress code for the faculty. Okay? The apparel oft proclaims the man, and they in France are the best rank and station, are of a most select and generous chief in that. He's saying, and in France, oh, do they know how to dress? His point is, dress appropriately for being in Paris. Okay? Neither a borrower nor a lender be. Don't borrow money from others. Don't lend money to others. Why? For loan oft loses both itself and friend. If you loan money to a friend, you often, two things happen. You don't get the money paid back, and because the money isn't paid back, what else have you lost? That friend. And borrowing dulleth edge of husbandry. Husbandry, does this literally have, okay, interesting, it has the metaphorical definition or the connotation of husbandry and not the literal denotation. Husbandry is the science of breeding animals. Okay? What is meant by it here? Thrift isn't, hard work is what's meant by it. Diligence in one's work. Why? Easier to take out a loan than it is to go do a back-breaking job. This above all, that is, what I'm about to say, is more important than everything else I've just said. Polonius is saying, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. What does that mean, to your own self be true? Are you able to lie to yourself? I mean, in one sense you can, but really speaking, no, because you know whether or not what you're telling yourself is true or a lie. Okay? So what does it mean to be true to yourself?
Just be honest.
Getting at the honesty part. What's that mean? To be honest to yourself. Every person, whether they acknowledge it or not, even the most whack job psychotic serial killer has internally some kind of moral code. That's what he's getting at. Be true to that moral compass that you have. If in your own thinking, you know you shouldn't do something, don't do that thing. If in your own heart of hearts you know you should do something, do that thing. Why? Because if you behave like that, Polonius says, then you can never be what to somebody else? You can never be false. If that person understands you and that you act according to your moral code, then you can't lie to that person. You can't be false to that person. Okay? So, that's his advice. I mentioned the other day, a lot of people reading this go, what a bunch of nonsense. The reason it is interpreted that way is because of the character of Polonius, not because of the character or the meaning of the words he gives. Polonius is the quintessential hypocrite. A person who says one thing and does another. Notice what began this little scene. Laertes giving advice to his sister, and his sister then does what? Don't be a hypocrite. Don't tell me to do one thing and then you do the other. And then his father comes in and gives all this great advice, and an awful lot of it he doesn't live by. He doesn't practice it himself. He doesn't keep his opinions to himself. He doesn't take the censure of others. We don't know anything about his clothing, so we can't talk about that part. But the very last part, to thine own self be true, it's not clear if Polonius has a true self. And what I mean by that is his ideas seemingly are bought and sold. Okay? His self is tied to whom? The kings. Okay? So, Laertes leaves. And Polonius asks, so what were you and Laertes talking about? And she tells him about Hamlet. And Polonius says, it hath been told to me of late, 992 I think, that you yourself have of your audience been most free and bounteous. That is, you have given Hamlet, what? How do I want to put this? Admission to your audience. It's a very ornate way of saying, you and Hamlet have spent a lot of time together. If it be so, that is, if that's true, then I must tell you, in way of caution, that you do not understand yourself so clearly as it behooves my daughter and your honor. That is, you're just a silly girl, Ophelia, so let me teach you about yourself in your relationships as my daughter. Okay? Advisor to the king, not what? He's advisor to the king. He's not a king himself. And because he's not a king himself, she is not what? She's not a princess. And she says, in response to us, what is between you two? That is, what's going on? Let's sit down and have a talk. He hath, my lord, of late made many tenders of his affection to me. Affection. You speak like a green girl. Naive, young. We don't know how old Ophelia is. We are never told. We are going to be told late in the play how old, Act 5, how old Hamlet is. Okay? Unsifted in such perilous circumstance. Perilous, why? Because she can lose something. Her virginity. Which, in the society that's being portrayed, is everything. Okay? Do you believe his tenders, as you call them? I do not know, my lord, what I should think. And there's been a lot of criticism written about Ophelia, as she's kind of a blank slate. She just takes whatever is said to her, right? So he says, I will teach you. Think yourself a baby that you have taken these tenders for true pay, which are not sterling, meaning they're not like when the United States used to be back on what's called the gold standard, where a dollar bill was actually worth a certain amount of gold. He says, these tenders, these signs of his affection, what are they, first of all? How do guys, quote unquote, woo girls, generally speaking? Or maybe 10 years ago, which might be 100 years ago. Flowers, cards, dates, whatever. Physical things, not sex. That comes after, okay? This is the smoothing of the road, so to speak. He says, all of those, they're not real. That's what he means by sterling, okay? She says, my Lord, he hath importuned me with love in honorable fashion. Importuned, begged. Fashion, as you may call it. In honorable fashion. What does she mean by fashion? The same thing Hamlet means when he talks about his inky clothes. That these are shows of what's inside. Honorable fashion means in honorable means, ways, displays. And notice Polonius latches on that word fashion because we have an entire industry called the fashion industry. What's it all about? The taking on and taking off of clothing. Why? Because depending on what you wear, you can look one way or another. He's saying, you're right, it is fashion. It's not what's real. So again, one of those themes that I had on the board the other day. Appearance versus reality. What's the reality? She thinks Hamlet really loves me. Polonius is like, it's not the reality. The reality is Hamlet wants sex with you. The appearance is he loves you. Okay? So, he goes on and talks, lines 115 and following are all about what? These tenders, these signs, these marks of affection are all tricks and traps. Merely designed to get into her bed. Okay? This, by the way, is one of the reasons I think that within the world of the play that Shakespeare creates, Hamlet and Ophelia have not had sex. Which is why Kenneth Branagh's film version, which is one of, if not the best film version of it, it's 4 hours long, by the way, is inappropriate. Because there's a scene in there where he and Ophelia are, dancing under the covers, so to speak. So he says, from this moment on, 133 or so, have you so slander any moment leisure as to give words or talk with the Lord Hamlet? Look to it. That is, stay away from Hamlet. From this moment on. And she says, I will obey, my Lord. Right? She's not Hermia. She's not Hermia. She's not going to go, well, I wish, Father, you looked with my eyes on Hamlet, etc. What's also part of his point that is also the same as Laertes' point? Hamlet can't choose for himself who his wife will be. That decision rests not only with himself, but with the king. Why? Because the future of the state is determined by that choice. So, scene 4, the platform. It's getting to be that very time of night where the ghost appears. Hamlet's there, Horatio is there, Marcellus is there. Okay? And there's noise in the background, like a party. And Horatio's kind of like, what's going on? Hamlet, the king doth wake tonight and takes his rouse. The king's having a party inside. Keeps wassail and the swaggering upspring reels. It's a drunken revelry. Horatio, is it a custom? That is this normal? Why is Horatio asked this question? Because normally he's at the university, where Hamlet normally is also. But Hamlet knows some things about his uncle. Hamlet, merry is it, but to my mind, though I am native here, and to the manor born, that is, I am native to this castle, he was born here, and to the manor, that is, the building, as well as to this whole kingly royal society, he says it is a custom more honored in the breach than the observance. He says this custom of this wild, drunken revelry is more honored by its being not very regularly practiced. Because what happens when you just party all night, every night? It's no longer a party, man. It's just everyday occurrence. It's not anything special anymore, okay? So he goes on, and the ghost comes in. Angels and ministers of grace, defend us. That's a prayer. Be thou a spirit of health, or goblin damned, to bring with thee airs from heaven, or blast from hell. Be thou intense wicked or charitable. Thou comest in such a questionable shape that I will speak to thee. I'll call thee Hamlet, king, father, royal Dane. Answer me. Notice the two binaries that Hamlet uses to introduce that speech. Heaven or hell, heaven or hell, heaven or hell. Whether you are from heaven or from hell, I'm going to speak to you. In other words, nothing's going to stop me. But why does he suggest it could be from hell? Because we're going to find the answer out to that in a little bit. So, the ghost does something like this, because it beckons to Hamlet. It wants you to go. Don't go. Hamlet, I will follow it. No. What should be the fear? I do not set my life at a pin's fee. Fee is cost. Pin, like a stick pin. What does he mean, I don't set my life at the cost of a stick pin? I don't care if I die. How do we know? Oh, that this too sullied flesh would thaw, melt, and resolve itself into a dew, or that the Almighty had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Suicide. Hamlet's opening speech, almost, after the little interview with his mother and stepfather, he's talking about suicide already, in Act 1. So he says, and as for my soul, what can it do to that, being a thing immortal as itself? It can't touch my soul. I'll follow it. What if it tempts you toward the flood? That is, what if it tempts you to throw yourself into a river? Okay? Hamlet, I'll follow it. No. So they try to hold Hamlet. He breaks free. And Hamlet and the ghost leave. Okay. Scene 4. Notice Hamlet and the ghost leave, and then Horatio and Marcellus leave. Then we get a new scene. How do you know when there's a scene change? When the stage is empty for a moment. Sometimes it's a long moment. Sometimes it's just a character leaves, and that character is the last person on the stage, and somebody else enters at the very moment that other character goes off. You have a scene change. Okay? The ghost and Hamlet come in. The ghost speaks. How do you portray the ghost in a play? Put a sheet over him? That might be it. Okay? So they talk. And Hamlet says, I'm bound to hear you. So art thou to revenge when thou shalt hear. And we get introduced to This is a revenge tragedy. Once the ghost says that, we know the genre. Okay? I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night, and for the day confined to fast in fires. You've got a gloss. Fast. Probably do without food. No. That is an absolutely asinine, idiotic, brainless, I can't think of another adjective, gloss. Why does that make no sense at all? He's a ghost. Ghosts lack what? Physicality. Ghosts don't eat. Ghosts don't drink. He's not condemned to fast, to not eat or drink anymore. Why? That happened when he was killed. Okay? To fast, what? In fires. Fast there probably means to be bound, to be secured in fires. Okay? It has sometimes been taken in the sense of doing general penance. It can also mean to suffer. Okay? So, for a certain time, doomed to walk in the night, and during the day to be confined or fast in fires, till the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away. What idea have we just been introduced to? Or what place? Purgatory. Catholic doctrine. The in-between place between hell down below and heaven up above. Thing is, if you're admitted to purgatory, it means you're not damned. If you get to purgatory, at some point in the future, your soul will arise to heaven. It will not go the other direction. Purgatory doesn't have a, doorway that says hell, heaven. It only has heaven. You don't go to purgatory and then get sent to hell. Okay? So, Hamlet Sr.'s ghost is not condemned. It is being judged. And that's what purgatory is all about. It's about judgment. Why? Because the impurities, to sullied flesh, so that the impurities are burned away. Once those impurities are gone, that soul will rise like a newborn baby. Take that back, not like a newborn baby. That soul will rise pure to be in the presence of God. All right? That's why it says, till the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away. This is not a Protestant idea. This is antithetical to Protestant Christianity. Okay? It's really important to get this. 1517, 1517, Martin Luther, and we're going to get even more behind. Got to talk about this. So, 17. Martin Luther, a German monk, nailed 95 theses to the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. Wittenberg. Where have we heard that name? It's where Hamlet and Horatio were students. Wittenberg. Okay? 95 theses. What's a thesis? Anybody? You've all written one before. It's an argument. It is a point of disputation. If you go on and get a master's degree, you'll write a really long one. If you get a doctorate, you'll write an even longer one. But it's the kind of thing that, I think your mama's oh yeah? That's a thesis. It's a bad one, but it's a thesis. It's a point to be argued or fought over, okay? He wrote 95 of these suckers and nailed them to the church door. Why? Because Luther thought there were impurities in the Roman Catholic Church. He was an Augustinian monk. Augustinian means there are 4 different kinds of monks named after different doctors, saints of the church. Augustinians, Dominicans, Franciscans, and the other one I'm drawing a blank on, okay? These were points that he wanted to argue. Come on, somebody, come talk to me about these. Things he wanted the church to purify. And they were occasioned, what occasioned this was a man named Johannes Tetzel, or John if you want. Tetzel, who was in indulgence seller. Okay? Indulgences were papers that came from Rome, right? Issued by the Pope. And an indulgence, where's that sheet of paper? So say, for example, this is the indulgence. Indulgences were worth different amounts of money. Okay? You pay so much, you get an indulgence. How much you pay determines the kind of indulgence you get. You could purchase indulgences for past sins. So, I'm going to give Mr. Tetzel 20 pounds, and he gives me an indulgence worth 20 pounds worth of time out of purgatory. All right? For something I've done in the past. So you could buy time out of punishment. You could also buy indulgences for sins you hadn't yet committed. So you're average red-blooded German male and you see some hot chick walking down the street and you go, damn, I think I'm going to rape her. Oh, I better run to the indulgence seller, literally. This was practiced. And you could buy an indulgence for rape that you hadn't yet committed. Buy the indulgence, rape the girl, and then when you go to purgatory, you go, this one's free. Okay, you can get me for all the others, but you can't hold this one to me. Tetzel had a little ditty that he sang. When the coin in the coffer clinks, okay, a soul from purgatory springs. Because you could buy indulgences that would get family members out of purgatory. Well, that just bugged the hell, pun intended, out of Luther. Okay? For 2 reasons. 1, theological. 2, political. Because the money was going to Rome to help rebuild or build St. Peter's Basilica. Wouldn't have been bad if the money stayed in Germany to do German stuff, you know. So, that's just one of the things Luther, was upset about. Priestly celibacy was another one. Luther eventually quits being a monk and he gets married. If I remember right, he marries a nun. Whew, really just blows everything out of the water, right? Nobody will take him up. So he starts writing books and articles. Should mention, 1453, it's a 3, another Johannes Gutenberg, invents the movable type printing press. Prior to that, if you wanted to distribute reading material, you had to handwrite all of it. See, so the indulgences could be printed quickly. Similarly, once Luther starts writing things, they get printed and it spreads. It's the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. Reformation, reforming of the church. That's what Luther intended, okay? 1521. So Luther writes for 4 years. He begins translating the Bible, putting it into, for the first time really, the native common vernacular language of his people, German. The Bible was only available in Latin until this point. In England, Some of it was available in English, all right? 1521, Luther is invited, and this is going to be referred to later in the play. Luther is invited to the Diet of WRMS, Worms, or Worms, as it's pronounced. Diet means a meeting. In the play, it's going to be called a convocation, all right? He's invited there, he thinks, finally, to get to discuss these. He's granted the right of he's granted safe passage by the Holy Roman Emperor. Nobody will touch you as you come to Worms. Nobody will stop you from leaving Worms. He says, cool. He gets there, and he discovers when he goes in to have this talk, piled on a table is everything he's written in the last 4 years. And here's the talk. Take it all back. Recant every last word. And Luther writes, shoot, now what do I do? And according to one of his biographers, and according to anecdotal evidence, he said, give me 24 hours to pray. And he said, okay. And he comes back 24 hours later and he says, unless shown to me by Holy Scripture, the Bible, or by my conscience, here I stand, I can do no other. That is, I stand by every last damn word in these books and papers. Unless you can prove to me, actually there was a third thing, reason, logic. Unless you can prove to me by reason, by Scripture, or if my conscience tells me I'm wrong, stand by it all. He leaves, he gets kidnapped, he gets taken away to a castle where he completes his translation. He's kidnapped by his friends, by the way. That's the Protestant Reformation. And it just spreads like wildfire. Someone we're going to talk about in a few days, Henry VIII. Henry VIII is given the title Defender of the Faith by the Pope because he writes stuff against Luther. And then he's the very same person who breaks the church in England away from the Pope because the Pope won't grant him a divorce from his first wife, who was, anybody know? His dead brother's wife. He married his dead brother because he said, dead brother's wife, married his dead brother's wife. He married his dead brother's wife because he said they never consummated their marriage. He died like 6 months after he and Catherine of Aragon. His brother's name was Arthur. After Arthur and Catherine were married, Arthur died. She never had a child, and Henry's like, she was a virgin. I can therefore marry her, which according to Catholic doctrine at the time, that was true, okay? She has a child, it's a daughter, Henry wants a divorce. Why? Daughters aren't any good. He wants a male. Gets married again, has another daughter, divorce, gets married again, finally a son, So all this is wound into the play. The distinction or the argument between Catholicism and Protestantism. Because Protestantism, through Luther, said there is no such thing as purgatory. Luther said you don't need priests. You don't need sacraments. You need a couple, but you don't need the 7 of the Catholic Church. All this other kind of stuff, all right? Shakespeare is writing this play within all of this controversy. Even though, this is 1517, Shakespeare's, at the very least, the play is being produced, 83 years after that. But 83 years, folks, is not that long. It's only been 80 years since World War II. So, he says, but if I could tell you about the terrors of my prison house, whoo-hoo, buddy, it would freeze your blood. If thou didst ever thy dear father love, line 23 or 24 on page 1257. Oh God. Why does Hamlet say, oh God? going to come out in a few minutes. He knows something, or he intuits. There's something fishy about Claudius and my mother. Revenge is foul and most unnatural murder. Murder? Murder most foul. As in the best it is. That is, all murder is foul. But this most foul, strange, and unnatural. How is it most foul, most strange, and most unnatural? Brother against brother. And in one sense you could say, well, Shakespeare, you've gone too much there. You've gone overboard. Why? Because the first murder was also brother against brother. And in that sense, this is the most natural kind of murder there is. So, the ghost tells Hamlet how he died. Hamlet, oh, my prophetic soul. Something inside. He knew there was something wrong with this picture. So the ghost tells him, the story that's given off is that I went and fell asleep in my garden and a serpent bit me. He says, no, because what happened was I went and fell asleep in my garden and my brother came up and he poured poison into my ear. Okay? So I'm going to skip a bunch. That's around line 74 and following. Okay? So he says, he died, line 79, with all my imperfections on my head. That is, he died unconfessed. He died without being able to go to a priest, say confession, and receive what's called the prayer of absolution, where a priest lays his hand on the penitent's head and forgives that person of every sin that was ever committed. Okay? Part of Catholic practice and doctrine in Eastern Orthodox, the Eastern Church, but not Protestant. You don't have to confess your sins to a pastor in the Protestant Church, in any of the branches of the Protestant Church. So he says, I died, what? With these imperfections in me. It's called dying. It's going to be used later in the play. Unshriven. Shriven, to shrive, means to make clean, essentially. So he died dirty. That's why he's in purgatory. If he'd been allowed, if Claudius said, I'm going to kill you, let me talk to a priest. If Claudius had said, cool, then when Hamlet Sr. died, he wouldn't go to purgatory. He would have gone to heaven because he would have been cleansed from his sins. But he says, skip down a little bit, he talks about damned incest. Line 84, but howsomever thou pursues this act, that is, whatever means you use to get this revenge, let taint not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive against thy mother aught. Leave her to heaven, and to those thorns that in her bosom lodge, to prick and sting her. Okay? So, don't taint your mind, and don't do anything to your mother. Right? Ghost leaves. Hamlet's left alone. Hamlet gets another soliloquy. So what does it mean, taint not your mind? What does it mean to taint something? You have a gallon of white paint, pure white. How can you taint it? You can put another color in it. How much? Does it have to take a lot? One drop would be enough to taint that. See, when he died, his mind was still tainted. He hadn't been cleansed. Taint not thy mind. What's that mean? Don't let your mind be made dirtied, sullied, fouled. By what? Desire for revenge? Okay, time out. How the hell is Hamlet not supposed to taint his mind when his father has just told him, his father's ghost, your uncle killed me. Kill him. But don't let it affect your mind. What? Gee, Dad, how am I supposed to do that? Because listen to Hamlet's next words with the 5 minutes we have left to go. Oh, all you host of heaven. That means all the angels. God, the Trinity, whole 9 yards. O earth. So, heaven, earth, and shall I couple hell too? Meaning everything that exists and is above existence. God. Oh, fie. Hold my heart. What's this hold my heart? It's like put steel bands around it. Why? Because what does his heart want to do? Like the biggest supernova the universe has ever seen. It's ready to shatter. Remember earlier he said down, that he has to push his heart down? In you, my sinews, grow not instant old. That is, don't die, but bear me stiffly up. Remember thee? Because what are the ghost's final words? Adieu, adieu, remember me. But don't let your mind be tainted by what you remember and by what I told you. Remember thee, aye, thou poor ghost, whiles memory holds a seat in this distracted globe. And Hamlet should point to his head when he says that. Some directors have suggested in this distracted globe, meaning the world, that the world is distracted. The world has lost its focus. Okay? But I think he's talking about his mind. Why? Oh, that this too sullied flesh, or that the Almighty had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Hamlet's mind is troubled. That's what's meant by distracted. Tracted, take off the dis part, means drawn. Dis, badly, negatively, against, evilly, if you want. His mind is drawn, taken to the dark side, so to speak. Remember thee? Yea, from the table of my memory, I'll wipe away all trivial fond records, all saws of books, all forms, all pressures past, that youth and observation copied there, and thy commandment all alone shall live within the book and volume of my brain, unmixed with baser matter. He's not going to taint his mind. He's going to do what? He's going to swap it. He's going to replace the white paint with a different color entirely. Everything he says I've learned from my earliest until today, gone. It's going to be replaced with what? Kill Claudius. Okay? Horatio, Marcellus comes in. Hamlet talks to them. He gets them to swear, all right, that they haven't seen the ghost, and they won't say anything about the ghost. And we hear the ghost bellow from underneath the stage, swear, and they agree to it. And Hamlet also gets them to agree to line 165 and following. He tells Horatio, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy, because Horatio said, this is wondrous strange. I've never seen anything like this. What's Hamlet mean that are dreamt of in your philosophy? It's assumed by a lot of critics, Horatio is a Stoic. Stoics say there is nothing after you die. There is no soul, it doesn't go on. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no eternal punishment, there's no eternal reward. And the whole purpose of life is to find an even keel so that you don't suffer And you also don't have great elation. Because if you get great elation, what's going to happen? You're going to suffer. So, he says, if I perchance put on an antic disposition after this moment, don't let anyone know. Don't give out that you know what I'm doing. What has Hamlet just told us he might do? What's meant by antic disposition? If I act crazy, don't go wink, wink. We know Hamlet's acting. That's why, major question for anybody reading the play, viewing the play is Hamlet crazy? Is he literally crazy? Or is it all an act? This comes when? After, oh, that this too sullied flesh. The question isn't, is Hamlet suicidal? Because that speech kind of implies he's thinking about it. Okay? Is to be suicidal to be crazy? It's a different question entirely. All right, we'll stop there. We got all the way to Act 2. We'll finish in May. All right, have a good day. Isn't there a quiz due?
Wednesday.
Wednesday? Thank you.